March 7, 1945. The eastern bank of the Rhine River near Remagen, Germany. Staff Sergeant Paul Kellner of the 2nd Armoured Division crouched behind the turret of his M4A3E8 Sherman, watching through binoculars as a German Panther emerged from the tree line approximately 1,200 yards distant. His crew called their tank Easy Does It, a reference both to the Easy 8 designation and to Kellner's preference for methodical gunnery over hasty shots. What happened in the next 90 seconds would contradict everything German tank commanders had been taught about engaging American armor. The Panther crew, following doctrine perfected on the Eastern Front, assumed they had ample time to acquire their target, range the distance, and fire with confidence. Their KK-42 75mm gun could reliably penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. At 1,200 yards, they should have enjoyed overwhelming advantages in both armor protection and effective range. They were catastrophically mistaken. The M4A3E8, introduced to combat units in December 1944, represented the culmination of American tank development during World War II. Its improvements over earlier Sherman variants were numerous, but one specific enhancement would prove tactically decisive in the war's final months. The Horizontal Volute Spring Suspension system, which gave the tank its Easy 8 nickname, provided a stable firing platform that allowed American gunners to engage targets accurately while moving, something German doctrine assumed was impossible for medium tanks. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Kellner's gunner, Corporal James Martindale, already had the Panther in his sights. The improved gun sight on the Easy 8, combined with the tank's stable suspension, allowed Martindale to track the moving target with precision that would have been impossible in earlier Sherman models. The vertical volute spring suspension used on previous Shermans transmitted road shocks directly into the hull, making accurate gunnery while moving extremely difficult. The HVSS system absorbed those shocks, dampening vibration and allowing the gun to remain steadily on target, even when the tank was traversing rough terrain. The tactical implications of this seemingly minor technical improvement were profound and would fundamentally alter the calculus of tank versus tank engagements in the final campaigns of the European War. The story of how American engineers developed a suspension system that would give Sherman crews a 90-second advantage over Panther gunners begins not with combat necessity, but with a persistent problem that had plagued American armor since the Sherman's introduction in 1942. The original M4 Sherman used a vertical volute spring suspension, known as VVSS, a system that was reliable, simple to maintain, and adequate for the tank's original design parameters. But as the Sherman evolved, gaining weight through additional armor, improved guns, and enhanced equipment, the VVSS began showing its limitations. The ride was harsh. Crews complained of fatigue from constant jarring over rough terrain. More critically for combat effectiveness, the suspension transmitted vibrations that made accurate gunnery while moving nearly impossible. German tank design had followed a different trajectory. The Panther, introduced in 1943, used torsion bar suspension, a more sophisticated system that provided a smoother ride and better cross-country mobility. Soviet 34 tanks also employed superior suspension systems, giving their crews advantages in mobility that American tankers envied. By 1943, American ordnance engineers recognized that Sherman suspension needed fundamental redesign. The challenge was developing a system that could handle the Sherman's increasing weight while improving ride quality and, most importantly, providing a stable platform for gunnery. The solution came from engineer Charles Voorhees and his team at the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. Working through late 1943 and early 1944, they developed the Horizontal Volute Spring Suspension system. Instead of vertical coil springs, the HVSS used horizontal volute springs enclosed in bogie assemblies. Each road wheel was independently sprung, allowing the suspension to absorb terrain irregularities without transmitting shock to the hull. The system also used wider tracks, 23 inches compared to the 16-inch tracks on VVSS Shermans. These wider tracks reduced ground pressure from 13.4 pounds per square inch to 10.4 pounds per square inch, improving mobility in soft terrain and reducing the likelihood of throwing tracks during violent maneuvers. The first prototype M4A3 with HVSS underwent testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland during spring 1944. Test reports documented dramatic improvements. The tank could traverse rough terrain at higher speeds without sacrificing crew comfort. More significantly, test firings demonstrated that gunners could maintain target track while the tank was moving over uneven ground, something that had been extremely difficult with VVSS suspension. The Army recognized the tactical value immediately and authorized production of what officially became the M4A3E8, though crews would universally call it the Easy 8. Production began in August 1944 at the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and at the Chrysler Detroit Tank Arsenal. Initial production rates were modest, with manufacturers needing to retool assembly lines for the new suspension components. The first Easy 8s reached port facilities on the East Coast in October 1944, were loaded aboard transport ships, and began arriving in European theatre ports in November. By December, the first combat units were receiving the new tanks, though in numbers insufficient to re-equip entire battalions. Commanders faced difficult choices about which companies would receive the improved Shermans while others continued fighting in earlier variants. The M4A3E8 retained the 76mm M1A2 gun that had been standard on late production Shermans since summer 1944. This gun, with a barrel length of 52 calibers, achieved a muzzle velocity of 792 meters per second, with standard M62 armor-piercing capped ammunition. Against Panther frontal armor, the 76mm gun's performance remained inadequate at long ranges. The Panther's glacis plate, 80mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees, created an effective thickness of 140mm that the M62 round could not reliably penetrate beyond close range. The Panther's gun mantlet, 100mm of cast steel on early models and 120mm on late production G variants, could be penetrated by the 76mm at ranges up to approximately 1,000 yards. But achieving hits on this relatively small target area required stable gunnery. The Germans understood their armor advantage. Panther crews were trained to engage enemy tanks at maximum effective range, typically between 1,500 and 2,000 yards, where the KOK 42 guns' superior ballistics and the Panther's armor protection created overwhelming tactical superiority. German doctrine emphasized static defensive positions that maximized these advantages. Panther commanders positioned their tanks in hull-down positions where possible, exposing only the heavily armored turret while keeping the more vulnerable lower hull hidden behind terrain features. From such positions, Panthers could engage, advancing American armor with confidence that return fire would be ineffective at long range. This tactical approach had proven effective throughout late 1944. During the Battle of the Bulge in December, German Panther units achieved favorable kill ratios against American armor despite being heavily outnumbered. The Panther's advantages in armor protection and gun performance allowed German crews to engage American tanks from positions and ranges where American return fire posed minimal threat. American commanders responded by emphasizing artillery support, airstrikes, and flanking maneuvers, accepting that direct tank versus tank combat favored German armor when fought at long range. The M4A3E8's tactical innovation was not about matching the Panther's armor or gun performance through technical specifications. American industry could not quickly redesign tank armor layouts or develop more powerful guns within the time constraints of active combat operations. Instead, the Easy 8 exploited a different tactical dimension entirely, the ability to fight effectively while moving. German tank doctrine, refined through years of combat on the Eastern Front, assumed that accurate tank gunnery required stationary firing positions. Tanks maneuvered to advantageous positions, stopped, acquired targets, fired, and then repositioned if necessary. This methodology worked well with torsion bar suspension and the generally flat terrain of the Eastern Front, where visibility often exceeded gun range. The EZ-8's HVSS suspension challenged this assumption. American crews discovered during initial combat trials that they could maintain target acquisition and fire accurately while moving at speeds up to 15 miles per hour over moderately rough terrain. The independent wheel suspension absorbed shocks that would have thrown the gun off target in earlier Shermans. Gunners using the M71D telescopic sight could track moving targets or maintain sight picture on stationary targets while their own tank was moving, capabilities that German gunners in Panthers could not match when their tanks were in motion. The tactical implications became apparent during engagements in February and March 1945 as American forces pushed into Germany itself. EZ-8-equipped units discovered they could employ movement-oriented tactics that negated some of the Panthers' range advantage. Rather than seeking static firing positions and attempting to trade shots at long range where German armor advantages dominated, EZ-8 crews could advance while firing, closing distance rapidly, while maintaining suppressive fire that forced German crews to button up and reduced their ability to return accurate fire. The 90-second advantage that title references derived from comparative gunnery trials conducted by 2nd Armored Division Ordnance officers in late February 1945. Testing measured the time required for tank crews to acquire a target at 1,200 yards, achieve firing solution, and deliver accurate fire under 3 conditions: stationary firing positions, firing while moving at 10 miles per hour, and firing while moving at 15 miles per hour. The results documented quantifiable tactical advantages that EZ-8 crews could exploit in combat. A Panther crew, operating from a stationary position, could acquire a target at 1,200 yards and deliver accurate first-round fire in approximately 45 to 60 seconds, depending on crew training and experience. This time included target acquisition, range estimation, loading, aiming, and firing. German crews were well trained in these procedures, and the Cheblyuk 42 gun's excellent optics facilitated rapid target engagement at long range. However, when a Panther attempted to fire while moving, accuracy degraded catastrophically. The torsion bar suspension, while providing good mobility, did not adequately dampen the vibrations and shocks transmitted to the gun. German doctrine therefore emphasized firing from stationary positions, accepting that this requirement limited tactical flexibility. An M4A3E8 crew could achieve similar results from stationary positions, acquiring targets and delivering accurate fire in 50 to 70 seconds at 1,200 yards. The American crews were generally less experienced than their German counterparts by this stage of the war, which partially offset equipment advantages. But the critical difference emerged when EZ-8s fired while moving. Test crews consistently delivered accurate fire within 75 to 90 seconds while moving at 10 to 15 miles per hour over terrain that would have made accurate gunnery impossible for earlier Sherman variants. This meant that in a tactical scenario where an EZ-8 detected a Panther at 1,200 yards and immediately began advancing while firing, the American tank could close the distance to approximately 800 yards, still maintaining suppressive fire, before the Panther crew could reliably deliver return fire. At 800 yards, the effective range for HVAP ammunition against Panther mantlets improved significantly, while the Panther's armor advantage remained but was less overwhelming than at longer ranges. More importantly, the EZ-8's movement made range estimation more difficult for German gunners, who were trained to engage stationary or slowly moving targets. The psychological impact on German tank crews proved as significant as the tactical advantages. Panther commanders had learned to rely on their armor protection and superior gun range. They expected American tanks to maneuver cautiously, seeking cover and attempting long-range duels where German advantages dominated. When EZ-8s instead advanced directly toward German positions while firing, it violated German expectations about how American armor fought. This aggressive movement, combined with accurate fire that forced German crews to close hatches and rely on limited periscope vision, disrupted the methodical gunnery procedures German doctrine emphasized. Staff Sergeant Kellner's engagement on March 7th illustrated these tactical principles under actual combat conditions. When the Panther emerged from the tree line at 1,200 yards, Kellner immediately ordered his driver to advance directly toward the German tank, while maintaining a slight angle to present the Sherman's frontal slope at its most effective angle. Corporal Martindale acquired the Panther in his sight and began firing while Easy Does It was moving at approximately 12 miles per hour. The first shot missed, impacting short of the target as Martindale corrected for range and movement. The second shot, fired 8 seconds later, struck the Panther's glacis plate and ricocheted, but the impact forced the German commander to close his cupola hatch and rely on periscopes, limiting his vision. The German gunner attempted to return fire but struggled to track the moving Sherman. The first German round passed overhead, the gunner having failed to properly lead the moving target. By this time, Kellner's Easy 8 had closed to approximately 1,000 yards. Martindale's third shot struck the Panther's gun mantlet. The tungsten carbide core of the HVAP round punched through the cast steel and detonated ammunition stored behind the mantlet. The Panther's turret erupted in secondary explosions. The engagement had lasted approximately 90 seconds from first sighting to the killing shot. The German crew never delivered effective return fire, having been disrupted by the Sherman's aggressive advance and suppressive fire. This pattern repeated across numerous engagements as Easy 8-equipped units pushed deeper into Germany during March and April 1945. German Panther units, already suffering from fuel shortages, inexperienced replacement crews, and declining maintenance standards, found themselves facing American armor that fought in ways German doctrine had not anticipated. The Panther's technical advantages in armor and gun performance remained real, but American tactics exploiting the Easy 8's superior fire-on-the-move capability increasingly negated those advantages in actual combat. The 2nd Armored Division's after-action reports from March 1945 provide detailed documentation of how Easy 8 tactics evolved through combat experience. Company commanders discovered that the HVSS suspension's advantages extended beyond simple fire-on-the-move capability. The improved mobility allowed Easy 8s to exploit terrain features more aggressively than earlier Shermans. Crews could traverse rough ground at higher speeds, positioning themselves for flank shots or occupying advantageous positions before German tanks could respond. The wider tracks reduced ground pressure significantly, allowing Easy 8s to operate effectively in muddy conditions that would have immobilized VVSS Shermans. Captain Robert Early, commanding Company A of the 66th Armored Regiment, documented specific tactical procedures his crews developed for engaging Panthers with Easy 8s. His after-action report dated March 15, 1945, outlined what he termed aggressive advancement doctrine. When Panthers were detected at ranges beyond 1,000 yards, Early's tank platoons would immediately advance in echelon formation, with lead tanks providing suppressive fire while supporting tanks maneuvered for flank positions. The key principle was continuous movement. By never allowing German gunners to target stationary Shermans, Early's crews forced Panther commanders into reactive postures where German technical advantages could not be fully exploited. Early's report noted that in 11 separate engagements during the first 2 weeks of March, his company destroyed or disabled 7 Panthers, while losing 2 Easy 8s. This favorable exchange ratio contrasted sharply with earlier experiences in December during the Bulge, when his company, then equipped with VVSS Shermans, had lost 5 tanks while destroying 3 Panthers. The improved suspension had not made Easy 8s invulnerable to Panther fire, but it had fundamentally altered the tactical dynamics of armored engagements in ways that favored American aggression over German defensive doctrine. The German perspective on these changing tactical circumstances appears in interrogation reports from captured Panther crews and in post-war interviews with surviving German tank commanders. Oberleutnant Hans Becker, a Panther platoon leader in the 11th Panzer Division, captured near the Ruhr in early April, described the frustration of facing Easy 8s during the division's retreat across the Rhine. In his interrogation on April 9, 1945, Becker stated that American tanks had changed their tactics, becoming more aggressive and apparently more capable of accurate fire while moving. He noted that his crews found it increasingly difficult to achieve hits on moving targets, particularly when American tanks advanced directly toward German positions rather than maneuvering for covered firing positions. Becker's account reveals the psychological impact of facing tactics that contradicted German expectations. Panther crews had been trained that their armor superiority meant they could fight from prepared positions with confidence. The doctrine emphasized patience, allowing enemy tanks to approach to medium range where the KOK-42 gun's superiority was most overwhelming, then destroying them with methodical aimed fire. This approach had worked effectively against Soviet armor on the Eastern Front and against American armor through most of 1944. But when American tanks refused to cooperate with this doctrine, instead advancing aggressively while firing, German crews found their training inadequate for the tactical situation they faced. The material realities of Germany's situation in early 1945 compounded these tactical difficulties. Fuel shortages severely limited Panther mobility. Tanks that might have repositioned to more advantageous terrain or executed flanking maneuvers against advancing American armor instead remained in static positions because commanders hoarded scarce fuel for what they hoped would be more critical situations. This forced passivity played directly into American tactical doctrine that emphasized aggressive maneuver. EZ-8s could exploit their mobility advantages fully, while Panthers, despite possessing theoretically superior cross-country capability, remained anchored to defensive positions by logistical constraints. Maintenance problems further degraded German tank effectiveness. The Panthers' sophisticated engineering required skilled maintenance and ready access to spare parts. By March 1945, both were in desperately short supply. Panthers that suffered minor mechanical damage often became permanent losses because repair facilities lacked parts or skilled mechanics. The final drive units, a persistent weakness in Panther design, failed with increasing frequency as maintenance standards declined. German units reported that mechanical failures disabled more Panthers than enemy action in some sectors during the final months of the war. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. American logistics, by contrast, functioned with overwhelming efficiency. EZ-8 units received regular supplies of ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. When tanks suffered mechanical damage, recovery vehicles retrieved them, and maintenance companies returned them to service within days. This logistical superiority meant that American armored units maintained high operational readiness rates even during sustained offensive operations. German units saw their effective strength erode daily as tanks were lost to mechanical failure, fuel shortages, and combat damage that could not be repaired. The introduction of EZ-8s coincided with another critical American advantage that magnified the suspension system's tactical benefits. By March 1945, Allied air superiority over Germany was absolute. The Luftwaffe could no longer contest American and British control of the skies. This meant that American armored columns advancing across Germany operated under constant air cover, P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs. Flying combat air patrol missions could respond within minutes to calls for air support. German tanks attempting to engage EZ-8s from prepared positions risked immediate attack from fighter bombers carrying rockets and bombs. The combination of EZ-8 mobility, aggressive American tactics, and overwhelming air support created tactical situations where German armor advantages became largely theoretical. A Panther that might destroy an EZ-8 from a prepared position at long range often could not remain in that position long enough to exploit its advantages. American doctrine called for suppressing German tanks with direct fire from advancing armor while simultaneously calling in airstrikes. German crews faced impossible choices: remain in position and risk destruction from the air, or reposition and expose themselves to fire from multiple EZ-8s advancing from different directions. Lieutenant Heinrich Müller, commanding a Panther in Panzer Division, survived the war and provided detailed accounts of fighting American armor during the Rhine crossing battles. In a 1953 interview, Müller described an engagement on March 24 near Darmstadt, where his platoon of 3 Panthers engaged elements of the 4th Armored Division. The American force included EZ-8s supported by tank destroyers and infantry. Müller's Panthers occupied prepared positions overlooking the approach route, with excellent fields of fire extending to 2,000 yards. According to German doctrine, this should have been an ideal defensive situation. The engagement began when American reconnaissance detected the German positions. Rather than attempting to force the position frontally, American armor dispersed and began advancing from multiple directions, while artillery fire suppressed the German positions. Müller's account emphasized the psychological pressure of facing artillery bombardment, advancing tanks, and the constant threat of air attack simultaneously. His gunner destroyed one advancing Sherman at approximately 1,400 yards, but before the crew could reload and acquire another target, artillery shells began landing around their position. Müller ordered his driver to reposition to alternate firing position approximately 200 yards to the rear. During this movement, his Panther was struck by fire from an EZ-8 that had flanked the original German position. The 76mm round penetrated the Panther's side armor, wounding 2 crew members and disabling the tank. Müller and his surviving crew members abandoned the vehicle and withdrew on foot. Müller's account illustrates how EZ-8 mobility and American combined arms doctrine negated Panther technical advantages. The German crew never had opportunity to exploit their tanks' superior armor and gun performance because they were constantly reacting to American tactical initiatives. The EZ-8 that delivered the killing shot had used the HVSS suspension's superior cross-country mobility to traverse rough terrain that earlier Shermans would have found difficult, positioning itself for a flank shot before the German crew could respond effectively. The Rhine River crossings in late March 1945 provided the largest-scale test of EZ-8 capabilities against German armor. American forces had reached the Rhine along much of its length by early March, but the river represented a formidable barrier, 300 to 400 yards wide in most sectors, with steep banks and strong currents. The Rhine had to be crossed under fire while German forces held the eastern bank. Engineers would have to construct bridges under German artillery fire and potential counterattacks. The success of these crossings depended partly on armored units, rapidly expanding bridgeheads once initial footholds were established. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, captured intact by elements of the 9th Armored Division on March 7th, provided the first opportunity for American armor to cross the Rhine in strength. Over the following days, despite German attempts to destroy the bridge through artillery fire and even V-2 rocket attacks, American engineers reinforced the structure and constructed additional pontoon bridges nearby. By March 10th, significant armored forces, including EZ-8-equipped units, had crossed and were expanding the bridgehead against intense German resistance. Panzer units rushed to contain the Remagen bridgehead included elements of the 11th Panzer Division and Panzer Lehr Division, both equipped primarily with Panthers and Panzer IVs. German High Command recognized that if American armor broke out of the bridgehead and advanced into the industrial Ruhr region, the war would be effectively over. Counterattacks launched on March 9th and 10th represented some of the most intense armored combat of the final campaign. EZ-8 units of the 7th Armored Division engaged German armor in the broken, hilly terrain east of Remagen, under conditions that favored neither side decisively. The terrain limited long-range engagement opportunities that might have favored Panthers, while restricting the open maneuvering that EZ-8s could exploit. Fighting occurred at close ranges, often under 600 yards, where the EZ-8's fire-on-the-move capability and faster turret traverse provided tactical advantages. German forces, critically short of fuel and ammunition, could not sustain the counterattacks. By March 12th, the bridgehead had expanded to a depth of 8 miles and a width of 25 miles. German armoured reserves that might have contained or eliminated the bridgehead had been ground down in a battle of attrition they could not win. The tactical performance of EZ-8s at Remagen attracted attention from senior American commanders. General Courtney Hodges, commanding 1st Army, noted in communications with General Omar Bradley that the new Sherman variant was proving highly effective in the mobile warfare conditions that characterized the drive into Germany. Bradley, commanding 12th Army Group, requested accelerated delivery of EZ-8s to units still equipped with earlier Sherman variants. Production had been steadily increasing through early 1945, with approximately 2,000 M4A3E8 tanks manufactured between August 1944 and May 1945, but demand from combat units exceeded supply throughout the war's final months. The broader pattern of American armored operations in March and April 1945 demonstrated how tactical innovations at the crew and company level scaled up to operational success. EZ-8 units led advances that covered hundreds of miles in weeks, a pace of exploitation that German armored forces could not match due to fuel shortages and mechanical unreliability. American doctrine emphasized maintaining momentum through sustained offensive operations. Tank crews fought until their ammunition was expended, then pulled back briefly to rearm and refuel before resuming the advance. This operational tempo, enabled by American logistical superiority, gave German forces no opportunity to establish stable defensive lines. The encirclement of the Ruhr industrial region in early April demonstrated the operational mobility that EZ-8 equipped units could achieve. Elements of 9th Army advancing from the north and 1st Army advancing from the south linked up near Lippstadt on April 1st, trapping approximately 300,000 German soldiers in a pocket centered on the Ruhr. This massive encirclement was completed in less than 3 weeks of mobile operations following the Rhine crossings. German Panther units trapped in the pocket fought with determination but lacked the fuel and ammunition to mount effective breakout attempts. Many Panthers were destroyed by their own crews after running out of fuel, a fate that captured the fundamental disparity between American and German logistical situations. The technical specifications of the EZ-8 continued to prove advantageous in the final weeks of combat. The HVSS suspension's reliability under sustained operations exceeded expectations. Maintenance reports from armored divisions indicated that EZ-8s required less frequent track maintenance than VVSS Shermans and suffered fewer thrown tracks during violent maneuvering. The wider tracks distributed ground pressure more evenly, reducing wear on the track pins and links. This reliability mattered significantly during sustained offensive operations, where maintenance time was limited. The improved ride quality reduced crew fatigue, a factor that became increasingly important as operations continued without pause. Tank crews in earlier Shermans frequently complained of exhaustion from the constant jarring transmitted through the VVSS suspension. EZ-8 crews, while still enduring the inherent discomforts of armored warfare, experienced less physical battering. This allowed them to maintain alertness and combat effectiveness during extended operations. Several company commanders noted in after-action reports that their EZ-8 crews seemed fresher and more capable during multi-day operations than crews in earlier Sherman variants had been under similar circumstances. The fire control advantages extended beyond the HVSS suspension itself. EZ-8s also featured improved gun sights and better crew layouts that facilitated communication between commander, gunner, and loader. The commander's position provided excellent visibility through the cupola, allowing rapid target acquisition. The gunner's position had been refined based on combat experience, placing controls and sights in optimal locations. These incremental improvements, combined with the stable firing platform the HVSS provided, created a weapon system where the total effectiveness exceeded the sum of individual components. German tank development had followed a different trajectory, one that emphasized armor protection and gun performance while accepting greater mechanical complexity. The Panther represented sophisticated engineering with its sloped armor, powerful gun, and torsion bar suspension. But this sophistication came at costs that became increasingly prohibitive as Germany's industrial capacity collapsed. Panthers required more man-hours to manufacture than Shermans, used strategic materials that were increasingly scarce, and demanded higher maintenance standards than German army logistics could provide by 1945. The contrast between American and German tank development philosophies reflected broader strategic differences. American doctrine emphasized producing adequate equipment in overwhelming quantities, accepting that individual vehicles might be technically inferior to enemy counterparts, but ensuring that American forces would enjoy massive numerical superiority. German doctrine pursued technical excellence, developing sophisticated weapons that provided qualitative advantages to offset numerical inferiority. Through most of the war, neither approach proved decisively superior. German technical excellence allowed relatively small forces to achieve disproportionate tactical success. American numerical superiority and logistical capability ensured strategic victory despite tactical setbacks. The EZ-8 represented a synthesis that combined American production capacity with meaningful technical improvements. It was not technically equal to the Panther in armor protection or gun performance, but it was good enough to fight Panthers effectively when employed properly. More importantly, it could be produced in sufficient numbers to equip significant portions of American armored forces. This combination of adequate technical capability and overwhelming numerical superiority proved strategically decisive in ways that pure technical excellence could not match. The final month of the European War saw EZ-8 units advancing rapidly across Germany against collapsing resistance. By late April, German forces had ceased to function as a coherent military organization in most sectors. Isolated units continued fighting, but coordinated defense had become impossible. EZ-8s led exploitation columns that covered dozens of miles daily, accepting surrenders from German units that had run out of fuel, ammunition, or will to continue. The war ended on May 8, 1945, with Germany's unconditional surrender. Post-war analysis by American ordnance officers examined EZ-8 performance comprehensively. Reports documented that M4A3E8 units achieved superior operational readiness rates compared to earlier Sherman variants. The HVSS suspension's reliability and the tank's generally sound mechanical design meant that EZ-8s remained combat effective throughout sustained operations. Maintenance requirements were reasonable, and the tank could be serviced by unit-level maintenance crews without requiring specialized depot facilities. Combat effectiveness assessments proved more complex. The EZ-8 had not transformed the Sherman into a tank technically superior to the Panther. In static gunnery duels at long range, Panthers retained significant advantages, but actual combat rarely consisted of static gunnery duels. Combat occurred in terrain that limited ranges, under combined arms conditions where artillery and air support mattered as much as tank characteristics, and in tactical situations where mobility and aggressive maneuver could be exploited. Under these realistic combat conditions, EZ-8s proved highly effective against German armor. The 90-second advantage that crews like Staff Sergeant Kellner's exploited was not about making EZ-8s invulnerable or even technically equal to Panthers. It was about providing American crews with tactical options that German doctrine had not anticipated and could not effectively counter given Germany's deteriorating material situation. The ability to deliver accurate fire while moving allowed American tanks to fight aggressively, closing ranges rapidly, and forcing German crews into reactive postures where their technical advantages could not be fully employed. The legacy of the M4A3E8 extended far beyond World War II. The EZ-8 saw extensive combat service in the Korean War beginning in June 1950, where its reliability and adequate combat capability proved valuable against North Korean and Chinese forces. EZ-8s performed effectively against Soviet-built 3485s, with the HVSS suspension's advantages proving as relevant in Korean terrain as they had been in Germany. Some EZ-8s remained in active service with various armies into the 1970s, a testament to the design's fundamental soundness. The suspension technology pioneered on the EZ-8 influenced subsequent American tank development. The M26 Pershing heavy tank used torsion bar suspension, but the lessons learned about providing stable firing platforms and reliable mobility informed its design. The M46 Patton, M47, and M48 tanks that served through the Cold War all incorporated understanding gained from EZ-8 combat experience about the importance of fire-on-the-move capability and suspension reliability. The story of the M4A3E8 EZ-8 illustrates fundamental principles about effective weapons design and tactical innovation. Technical specifications matter, but they do not determine combat outcomes in isolation. How weapons are employed tactically, how well they are supported logistically, and how effectively they are integrated into combined arms doctrine all matter as much as raw performance characteristics. The EZ-8 was not the best tank of World War II by most technical measures, but it was good enough to win when employed by well-trained crews, supported by superior logistics, and integrated into effective operational doctrine. The 90 seconds that German Panther crews lost when facing advancing EZ-8s represented more than just a gunnery disadvantage. Those 90 seconds symbolized the cumulative impact of American industrial capacity, tactical innovation, and operational flexibility. German tank design had pursued technical excellence in pursuit of qualitative superiority that might offset numerical inferiority. American tank design pursued adequate capability that could be produced in overwhelming numbers and employed aggressively by well-supported crews. In March 1945, when these philosophies collided on German soil, the American approach proved decisively superior. Staff Sergeant Kellner and Corporal Martindale, the crew of Easy Does It, survived the war. Their engagement on March 7th near Remagen represented one small action in a massive campaign, but it captured the essential dynamics of how American armor fought in the war's final months. By exploiting the EZ-8's mobility and fire-on-the-move capability, American crews could engage German armor aggressively, closing ranges where American ammunition was effective and forcing German crews to fight in ways their doctrine had not emphasized. The stable firing platform that HVSS suspension provided transformed tactical theory into combat reality, giving American crews the confidence to advance directly toward enemy positions while maintaining suppressive fire. The transformation of American tank tactics between June 1944 and April 1945 reflected hard-won combat experience and continuous technical improvement. Crews that had fought cautiously in Normandy, respecting German armor superiority and seeking favorable tactical situations, had become confident by spring 1945, willing to engage Panthers directly and trusting their equipment and training. The EZ-8 contributed significantly to this transformation, providing capabilities that made aggressive tactics viable rather than suicidal. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.